Okay, well here I am in my little experimental corner of my garage. I brought my rack in here, and I usually keep it here when I'm off the road to try out new things, experiment, tweak my system, my setup. And I know it must look pretty daunting and pretty overwhelming and complex, and it is, but I'm going to go through it piece by piece and explain everything, explain why it's in here, what it does, how it got there, the whole history of this. I started putting racks together in the early 70s actually. And because I used to use Ampeg SVTs in the old days, and Ampeg went out of business for a while in the mid to late 70s. They went out of business, and so I started to go into using preamps and power amps, basically the components of an amplifier taken apart piece by piece. Just as in a home stereo, you can buy a tuner and a CD player and a thing, or you can have it all together in one. A regular amplifier you buy in a store is kind of an all-together in one. And a rack is a way of taking all those individual components and separating them out and doing higher quality or more variations or versatility. So basically that's what I did, started to do back in the early 70s. And it turned into this monstrosity. But again, piece by piece, it'll make sense to you as to why everything is there. So as I explained in some of the other sections of the video, I have the space here with two outputs. One pickup has one output, the other pickup has another output. Reason for that, one is low frequencies, this one, closer to the neck. One is higher frequencies, can be either here or even down here. Alone, it's not a bass tone. Alone, nice and basic, but you can't hear the notes. Together, kind of get the best of both worlds there. Reason for that, it's a bi-amping thing. Now these amps, these Ampeg SVT4 Pros, they do bi-amping all on their own without any special pickup situation. Bi-amping is where you split your signal and send it to two different amplifiers, much like your home stereo system with a woofer and a tweeter. The tweeter sounds really good at high frequencies, but it can't do the lows, and vice versa for the woofer. So basically that's a way of doing it with bass, because bass is such a broad range instrument. The lows are so deep and low, and the highs are as high as any other instrument will be. So if you split the frequencies up and separate them out into two different amps, it's just a more efficient way, a more clean way of doing things. So basically I'm plugged into this preamp. I get a clean tone with low frequencies trimmed off. I added a parametric equalizer that's plugged into the back of this to trim off some low frequencies. So it's basically just a clean, it's not a real bass tone, but it's just the kind of the upper part of the bass tone. So you can hear all the chords and all the high frequency, all the noise and stuff, all this picking and string noise, all the articulation. Then what I'll do with the bass, plugged into this here, one pickup plugged into there. Second pickup is plugged into a second SVT, which is just low frequencies. Within its loop, it has a send and receive, an effects loop. I have channel 2 of my compression, my Ashley compressor, not a compressor, a compressor. Just for a little bit higher quality compression. The compression that's in the SVT4 Pro is pretty darn good, but I'm just used to the Ashleys, and it gives you a little bit more variation. So one channel is for this, one channel is for the low end. So now when I mix the two together, like I said before, so I remember back in the 80s, and probably a lot of guys still do it now, where the guitar players had this huge pedal board with thousands of switches on and off and all these things. And basically I had one switch, and it was distortion on, distortion off. As you can see, that makes a big difference harmonically. And then I have both pickups on low and high, the normal bass tone. Cleans right up with the distortion off. So basically I would just have one foot switch out to my microphone, and it would just say, you know, on and off. We used to make a big joke out of that because the guitar players had this dance on thousands of pedals and stuff was always breaking. And distortion on, distortion off. Those are my two settings that I had. So the reason why I did it like that too, why I had all my stuff in the rack, when you have a pedal board, you basically have to send your tone all the way out to the pedal board and then back again on a cable, and it's just a great opportunity for catastrophe to happen. So any effects I use, anything I'm doing is right all in here. The only signal that I send is from my bass. Usually I have 2 wireless setups because I have 2 amps, twice as much money, unfortunately. I shot myself in the foot on that one. But basically, one you can see is red for the red out, and one is blue for the blue out, and then they run back to a wireless receiver, which goes into here, and that's all. And one cord, this yellow cord goes out to the front of the stage, kind of disorganized in this experimental spot here. Just runs all the way out there. It's a foot switch is by Mesa Boogie, but that's just by coincidence, and turns the distortion on or off, no problem. So that's the only real effects. People ask, well, like, what effects do you use? That's really all I use is distortion on or off. There's compression built into the system too. Now there is I'll just touch on it briefly. There is one effects thing I do use because I've fortunately over the years I've had the luxury of having a rack and having guys that'll move it and carry it for me and put it on a truck. So if I have to do a show where I have to do things cut down, I take one SVT4 Pro and that's it. Plug in, go. It's got everything I need in one amp, which is a really great thing about this. I'm not trying to make this a commercial for Ampeg, but it's what I really use, and it really does work, and it's never let me down. So I'm just speaking my mind here about this gear. It's got built-in graphic EQ, built-in compression, built-in crossover. All this stuff is all in there. 2 separate power amps inside it. So it's got everything I would ever need to do a show. But when I have the luxury of using a rack, I'll take this whole thing. One thing I added to the rack, I was lucky enough to acquire one of these Eventide. It's called an Eclipse. It's basically a pitch changing effects device. And I have it hooked through a Bob Bradshaw little effects loop send so I can adjust levels on it. And basically all it's going to do is you have me to play chords.